Good morning, students. Today we're going to work on one of my favorite short stories called The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, and I hope that you find it just as strange and spooky as I always have. The standards that we are going to look at while we're reading this story are a review of citing textual evidence. We're going to be working on that for almost every unit that we do. Also, we'll be looking at determining theme, and this text is a high school level text, so the theme may be a little bit tougher to determine. And our new standard that we are adding today is comparing and contrasting two texts, and not just looking at what's both alike and different in those two texts, but how the structure contributes to theme and meaning. And the two texts will be The Telltale Heart in print and The Telltale Heart in video. So this lesson will have multiple days to it and multiple graphic organizers and things for you to look at on the website. More about that later. I do want to remind you as you pause the video in just a few moments to read the story that you still need to annotate. You always want to annotate whatever text that we're working on, whether it's a short story or a poem or a nonfiction piece, whatever it is. You always want to be annotating because really annotating is just another word for thinking, either thinking out loud, thinking on the computer, thinking on paper. It just helps your mind focus. If you think back to Unit 1, when we did the story Through the Tunnel, and Samuel demonstrated how to annotate that text, that is what I want you to continue to do with all of our text. Also, I want you to find the graphic organizer on the website called Literary Style Graphic Organizer. Literary Style Graphic Organizer for The Telltale Heart. You can make a copy of that in your Google Drive if you want to fill it out, or you can just jot down notes on your own notebook paper, whatever works for you. But I do want you to fill that out as we go, because as you read, because it will help you in focusing on the story, because the language is very stilted in the story, and you need to really focus on the meaning behind the words. Three literary terms that I want us to make note of as we read the story: dramatic irony, situational irony, and verbal irony. Now, we know what irony is when an event or a state of affairs turns out completely different than what we might have expected. That's irony. And situational irony is for example, there's a story called The Lottery that opens on a beautiful June summer day, and the birds are singing and everything is wonderful. But the situational irony is somebody's going to die that day. The dramatic irony is when the audience has knowledge that the characters in the text do not. An example of that would be Romeo and Juliet. Before we even read the play, we know that both Romeo and Juliet are going to die. That's dramatic irony. And the third kind we're going to look at today as you read is verbal irony. It's very much related to dramatic irony in that the audience knows what the character is saying, thus verbal, is the opposite of what he or she thinks, what the character thinks. So we're going to see a lot of examples of verbal irony in this story, and we're going to actually look at one together in just a second. By the end of the story, I want you to make note of, let's say, at least 3 instances of irony that you see in the story as you read. And you can use that as a basis for your essay that you are going to write, your compare-contrast essay that you will write over the print versus the video text. So I'm telling you right now, your assessment over this will be an essay. It's going to be a compare contrast essay of 4 to 5 paragraphs, and I'll have some more information about that in just a few minutes after you read the story. But you need to be paying particular attention to the details in the story. So I want you to take a look at your story, and I am going to read the first paragraph. And then we're going to talk about what your brain should be saying to the first paragraph. Yes, you should be talking to the text. And so then after that, you can pause this video and read and annotate and fill out the graphic organizer for this story. And then we will come back and we're going to talk a little bit about irony. So let me attempt to share my screen. Okay, so let's take a look at the first paragraph together. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. So here we have the narrator opening up, saying to the reader, us, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not crazy. I don't know why you think I'm crazy. I'm fine. Now, he does mention the disease. What disease? As a reader, you should be saying, what disease? And perhaps in your notes or on your graphic organizer, you're writing down the word acute. Now, what does acute mean? My sense of hearing acute. It means what? Very sharp. Because if you look at the context clues of the next sentence, I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. So he says he has great hearing. Now, as a reader, you should be saying, why is a narrator talking about how great his hearing is? Is this foreshadowing? Is this going to be important to the story later on? As a reader, I need to be looking for references of sound. Is that going to help me determine something about the characterization? Is it going to help me determine theme? Is it going to help me understand the plot development? So I need to be looking for things that reference sound. And he also keeps using the word nervous, and then he'll use the word calmly. So he sets up a paradox here of a character sketch almost of himself. He's not saying, I'm not nervous, I'm calm. Have you ever known someone who might get upset over something and you tell them to calm down and they say, oh, I'm calm, when really they're not calm? So all of these things should be pointing to, I wonder if the narrator's mental faculties are challenged in some way. What is wrong with him? There's only one way to find out, and that is to read further. So as you read this story, and you do need to read it slowly, the vocabulary is very high level. There are subtle uses of repeated words. Then you will need to pay attention to those. So go ahead, pause this video, read your story, fill out your graphic organizers, and we'll be back together in a few moments. Okay, so hopefully you've read the story, you've enjoyed the story. You might want to read the story a couple of additional times since you are going to be writing an essay on the story soon. So first, let's talk about the irony that you saw in the story. Three very obvious examples of irony that I think we need to point out is first, right from the beginning of the story, how the narrator attempts to justify his sanity when it becomes crystal clear that he is insane throughout the story. And he keeps saying to the reader, hey, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine, I'm not insane. And then he justifies that. So as the reader, we know that he is insane. We see by his end actions. So that is an example of dramatic irony. The second example of irony that I found is the fact that by the time you get to the end of the story, the readers know that he has buried the body of the old man under the floorboards. And the police are sitting right in the room with the body, and they have no idea. And so they are there to question the narrator because of a report of a scream, but they're sitting on top of the dead man's body. They have no idea, but we, as the reader, we know. And so that is an example of dramatic irony. And then verbal irony can be seen by the end of the story. We, the reader, we think that the narrator is going to get away with murder. And in fact, he would have had he not inadvertently confessed at the end of the story when he says it's the beating of the old man's heart. And if you think back to the beginning paragraph, he said his sense of hearing was acute. We talked about that. And here he says he hears the beating of the heart, which obviously he doesn't, but he says he does. And so he, in effect, confesses to the police, hey, the old man's heart, can't you all hear it? It's beating here under the floorboards. He thinks that they can hear it as well as he hears it, but no one hears anything because the heart is not beating, obviously. And so that is an example of verbal irony. So you see the irony behind all three of those situations, each with dramatic or situational and verbal irony, all related. So you could use that as a starting point for your essay if you wanted to compare and contrast the use of irony. So let's move to our next assignment. So if you will find the file called Compare Contrast Essay on the website. Let me attempt to share my screen with you so we can pull this assignment up, maybe. If I can find it. Maybe not. Hang on. All right, now let me attempt to share my screen again. And there it is. Okay. All right, so let's look at this file. Our writing task, now obviously I've got to correct the due date. It's not September 13th, 2019. Writing task. Write an essay that compares and contrasts the text version of The Telltale Heart and the film version of The Telltale Heart, which you are going to watch in just a few moments. Consider the major differences and similarities between the two formats. Evaluate is an important word, how each text uses elements of literature and what effect it has on the story and the reader. So remember at the beginning of this recording, we talked about one of our standards is to compare and contrast text and how structure contributes to meaning and style, and that's what that's talking about, what effect it has on the story and the reader. A successful compare and contrast essay will have a compelling thesis. We already know what a thesis is. We did that in Unit 1, and will then make meaningful connections between the text to support the claim from the thesis. here is our standard, and here is our learning target. I can compare and contrast the effects of different kinds of structures in a literary text and how each one contributes to style and meaning. So let's look at our purpose of writing is not to state the obvious. We're not going to say, one of our points will not be there are two insane people, one in the movie and one in the print. No. We're going to illuminate subtle differences or unexpected similarities between the two subjects. The thesis should clearly state the subjects that are to be compared, contrasted, or both, and it should state what is to be learned from doing so. Now, there are two main organizing strategies that you can use. I'm going to talk about those in just a second, and I'm going to give you a recommendation. And then we need to make sure that we're using transitions. We talked about that earlier in the year. Transitions are super important. So let's look at the two structures that you can use to organize your essay. One is called block structure. And that is where you would have 4 paragraphs. Now you may be thinking to yourself, oh good, 4 is 1 less than 5. Look at Ms. Joyner do math. And so I'm going to go with that one because I only have to write 4 paragraphs. That's not a good way to think of the structure. Because technically you're going to have the same volume of information, it's just going to be organized differently. So first you would have your introduction, and remember I had a video in Unit 1 on how to write a strong introduction. You can revisit that if you need to. Then your next paragraph would be all about the Telltale Heart print story, let's say. And you're going to make 3 points. So you're still making your 3 points, but you're doing it all in 1 paragraph. Then you would have a transition. Then you would have the Telltale Heart video, everything about the Telltale Heart video in another paragraph. And then your 4th paragraph would be your conclusion. Now, yes, this is an acceptable structure. It is acceptable for the Kentucky Department of Education. However, I don't recommend this. Because here's what happens. One of 2 things happens. One, you just write down 3 things that you noticed and you don't know what else to write. Or 2, you start to ramble. And it's very easy because this doesn't have what I call a skeletal structure. It has a more open structure. And so rambling is always a danger with this. But yes, it is acceptable. If you want to try it, you certainly can. Just be aware of the danger to stay on topic. This one I recommend, point by point, this one's called. You have an introduction, just like you had on the other one, but then you have 3 body paragraphs. In body paragraph 1, you talk about the Telltale Heart print and then the Telltale Heart video. So if you're going to talk about symbols, let's say, in the Telltale Heart print and video, obviously the eye would be one, another one would be the heart. This paragraph might be about the eye in the print, the eye in the video. Then the 3rd paragraph, which would be body paragraph 2, would be the heart in the print, the heart in the video. And then the 3rd body paragraph would be whatever symbol that you might come up with in the print and then the video, and then the conclusion. And because this one is more refined and definite in its structure, the danger of rambling is removed, unlike block structure. Now, how will you fill these paragraphs? Once you make your point, then you have to find textual evidence. So we've been working on this since school started, using textual evidence. So for the print, that's easy. You can go back and quote some material from the story. But for the video, which you're going to watch in just a few minutes, the link will be on the website. You will need to watch that video multiple times in order to garner enough textual evidence. Remember, textual text in this case is the video. So you will say the video references so-and-so, or in the video the reader can see. So you're still using textual evidence even though it's coming from a video. So you can either compare, you can contrast, you can do both. It is up to you. You can have 3 comparisons. You can have 3 differences. You can have 2 comparisons and 1 difference. Any combination, whatever works for you. Now also in this file, I've given you the transitional words that I want to see you use both within and between the paragraph. That's one thing that the Kentucky Department of Education is putting emphasis on these last 2 years are transitions. And it's not just first, second, third, last. That's 2nd grade transitions. We're not in 2nd grade. The transitions that we have listed here are more scholarly, and these are the ones that KDE is looking for and colleges are looking for. You know, we're not looking for 2nd grade work from 8th graders. So I want to see some of these words within and between your paragraphs. I have some graphic organizers here to help you if you want to use them. You do not have to. These are optional, but you see 2 charts here. How are they alike and how are they different? And so you can use those to help you kind of brainstorm for your essay. I have given you a rubric as well for what I'll be looking for in grading this essay. So now what I want you to do is watch the video. The link is on the website, and you'll need to probably watch it a couple times. You'll want to take some notes, and then go back to this file and begin brainstorming. Of course, you can always email me any questions that you might have, but we'll have more video meetings about this, but you can always email me your thesis statement as well. So this will be several days worth of work right here. All right, thanks so much for listening to our first unit, our first part of Unit 2's lessons.